Magic Mage from 243, and today I'm here to address a question I've seen throughout our Discord channels. I've gotten asked by many players in the game, particularly in the lower servers, and even still in Season 3. And it's, how do I make my Lightning March work? What's the best marches to use for different aspects within the game? Lightning is not an easy march to master. And if you haven't watched Paika's video regarding the Lightning March and Conquest, especially if you're early in the server, I would highly recommend you to watch that video before making the decision to elect the path for Lightning as your main path. And the reason is the Lightning bosses are extremely difficult to kill. The March is extremely hard to build in a way where you can be successful in all the events. Your contribution points for walls and cities and garrisons and core, all of those have very little impact versus if you were electing even a water or a fire or an earth march. So I really encourage you to think before choosing to elect the Lightning March. Now, I had actually went with the Water March path, and about 3 months into the game started switching over, and 6 months in completely switched over to the Lightning March. I was playing the Lightning March with Khan and YSG with Richard and Peter. In September, I was actually able to obtain the magical immortal within our Lightning March, and that would be Hammurabi. And I actually played with him all the way until about December. And in December, I realized that my performance was actually worse when I added him into my March than when I had YSG or Yasanje. And so I put YSG back in right around January and started playing with him in my main March at this point in time. Now, in between that time frame, I actually also obtained, I want to say around October, Himiko to see if Himiko would be better suited. So I tried Himiko with Hammurabi. I also tried Himiko with Genghis Khan, and I've tried Hammurabi with Genghis Khan, and all those different configurations for different aspects. And there's different times where I find each of those different back immortals beneficial. But at this point, what I am doing for my main March really is that basic March. I actually elected to use Peter instead of El Cid. At the time, El Cid was very difficult to obtain for free. And Peter I had actually maxed as my first immortal on the Lightning March. So I actually had Peter even before I even switched to Lightning. And I had already started to figure out how to make Peter work within my March. Now, Peter is a Spearman Immortal, and that makes the synergy between my second, my third, and the fourth March a little bit more complicated because the Spearman Immortals in the other Marches aren't as easy to obtain. They're more expensive, and some of them aren't as advantageous as some of your Cavalry and your Defense Immortals, your Shieldmen. So there is some cons with that as well. However, I have been able to make Peter work really well for me. Early in the game, one of the big things I needed to do with Peter was to make sure he was able to stay alive. And so I had to develop skills that allowed for that. Now, fighting will is one of the skills I really enjoyed early on, and I still find advantageous. And one of the reasons why is that rooting effect. And what it did is it rooted the other teammates, and while they were under that root effect, I was able to allow for Richard to, with Adrenaline Rush, get enough energy for his ultimate skill to proctor. So when his ultimate skill proctored, he would be able to stun multiple opponents. So really, my ideal was to get Peter to root to give me enough time for Richard to stun, while depending upon Khan to be my main damage dealer and YSG to take most of that damage away from my immortals so they could all perform, with Peter supporting Khan. particularly with some of those front row mortals. So I really needed for this setup to work for Peter to be in front of Khan, and then YSG actually was helpful enough and occasionally would get some pretty good, decent attacks in. So this March lineup really did work. Like I said, early on in the game, I had misleading in my alignment. I still actually use it occasionally now, and that was to help reduce that accuracy rate so Peter would stay alive longer as well, but also so I had more chances to proctor stuns with ultimate skill with Richard. So there was a couple of things I did to try to keep Peter alive. The Oaken Guard also really helped with reducing that physical damage they received. And then I also worked on my individual skills, always focusing on my spearman skills after my bowman ones to make sure I was keeping Peter alive as long as possible so he would be able to root so I could get my stuns in. So really, I use this march as my basic march. I would, when I was facing some Shadow Immortal players, move Richard out and put Charles in. There was times where when I was facing some high crit immortals, particularly fire, I would put Himiko in to remove one of their high crit damage dealers in the back row, so I had more of a chance, and then used Khan to help with the damage as well. There were times where I would throw in both Himiko and Hammer Ruby together to see how that double magic worked, especially when my opponent had very weak defensive skills against the magical team. So I really, when I built my march, knew I was actually building a second march of substitutes or tier T strings to move into my main march based off of the different aspects and elements I was playing the game in. The downside to that is when you're building your main march, you're technically building a main march with substitutes. So it takes a lot longer. It's a lot more resources. And you have to really figure out how you're going to build that so you're really developing the skills that you want to develop when. Now, for me, that was easy. I started with my main damage dealer, which was Khan. And then from Khan, I started working backwards. So I developed my immortal for Richard. I made sure his skills were enhanced as well. So I was supporting my main damage dealer. And then I started looking at the key elemental skills that transferred to multiple immortals easily. So the ones that Richard were using, I would also place on Charles. So that's one of the reasons why I developed Richard's skill specs, because his skills were synonymous to what I was using on Charles. With Hannibal, I used the same skills I put on Himiko. Himiko, I did use some of the skills from Khan, so I had to adjust some of those around as well. And Khan wound up taking a couple skills from YSG. So again, I really focused on what skills and what immortals were going to be advantageous to move around based off of the synergy of who I was substituting in and out of my marches. When I moved from my water march to my lightning march, for the longest time, I was actually running Khan with Merlin and then Peter and Richard, because YSG actually was my last immortal I was able to obtain early in the game for that lightning march. So I actually had Merlin and Khan maxed out, and that synergy worked fairly well. It was not the best because I lost that bonus for the increased troop HP. But overall, with the four immortals, it really did work well with that increased damage that I could get with Merlin. The downside with Merlin is never was I freezing any of my immortals, so he never got that increased damage. But realistically, that march worked well, especially when I put Merlin in as a support immortal used to gain attack, because YSG can also be a very strong attack immortal. So when I was originally attacking bosses, you'll notice I actually have a couple of troops here. Now these are always moving, always changing, always evolving. And I found that originally, for the longest time, attacking the bosses with my full lightning march was helpful. However, recently I've been trying to work things out with the spider march, and I've been able to develop one that works with the immortals I had. I developed Himiko. I want to say that she also came in around December. And then Alexander, I started developing in February of this year. So some of those immortals are new. And then Quinn, I've actually just started developing him about a month and a half ago. So he's a slow build for me to develop. However, I liked the different attributes of the ultimate skills that each of them had, and they seemed to pair up well when attacking the spider. And they're immortals that I could obtain easily for free or I already had. And they also worked with the skills I had in place. So I wound up developing this march for the spider. And what's really interesting is my Quinn, he's not super well developed. He's still at level 30. His armor is not the best, but we are getting closer to that. Where are we here? Just want to make sure he does have skills in. So I'm going to activate the spider boss skills. And the reason why I'm activating these skills is I realized they work really well for my bosses at this point. Originally, it didn't, but now Quinn is leveled up to 30. I've noticed actually a difference between 29 and 30, and he's now actually performing better against these bosses. So I'm going to start by taking a simple attack on the giant breakers with this setup and just show you exactly the damage I'm able to do. I do still need to actually apply the multiple damage skill, which triples my AP, but it causes the double damage to really make the damage I need still, because these lightning bosses, they really have a high HP. And because of that, they're really hard to kill. They're actually one of the hardest bosses to kill in the game. I think the fire ones are really close after that, followed probably by your water march bosses, and then finishing with your bosses for your earth. And you'll notice that I was able to do this. Now, my deaths aren't great. I would like to see even lower deaths than this. I'm hoping as Quinn is developed a little bit more, I might actually see a decreased death rate further. But at this point, I can, with that skill, get a 90% damage. Earlier in the game, I got 92% that I did. And so it's right around 90, 92. And then I can, let me just change my skills here, make sure it's where I want them. Yeah, I'll use this one for right now. It should let me use my free AP attack to help me decrease the AP for the Lightning March, because the Lightning March bosses do take a lot of AP. So we're going to take and compare this. The next one I will show you is actually the Earth March bosses, because I'm still working on developing that to have that as a second march right now for myself. And while I have almost all of my immortals for the Earth March built up, we're just go by power here. So you will see I do have Alexander the Great. He's at 25 for a boost and level 50 for his level energy experience. Same with Himiko. And then Charles is a little bit further down, I think, because he doesn't have any skills on him in this grouping. Just throw his artifact on there. So you'll see Charles is also there, and Zenobia, I'm almost there. She's at 47 right now. So we're almost at that point. I do have an artifact for Zenobia, but I was using it on Quinn and he disappeared there. I'll put it back on. There we go. All right. And then now I'm just going to take and do one more giant breaker, just because I changed that artifact. I want to compare. Is the artifacts aren't too different, but I think this one will give me a slightly better boost. So we're going to take and again try to kill this one here. Now at this point, I do have the decoration skin on from Core to help with damage to gnomes. Sometimes I find the death rate one helps a little bit too. I've tried the HP troop one, and while it does increase my damage, my deaths are significantly more, and it doesn't outweigh the damage to I'm producing. So I do wind up using that 3% death rate Let's see where this went to. That's 88. So actually the other artifact was better. So where's my immortals? We'll switch this one back, and so switch for, I think this is the one I had on him. Yes. So we'll put that one back on. And then we'll take and use my free attack. So I'm not using AP. So it helps at least save. Really, I'm using, because it doubles, triples the AP I'm using. I go out twice. I would have probably had to use 4 attacks if I didn't use this, or maybe at least 2. So this helps a little bit, decreasing those AP routes. So the next one I'm going to do is an Earth, which is the Metallic Fortress boss at level 15 as well. And this one here, you'll notice I'll be able to kill it with 1 attack. Now, a good rule of thumb, at least with the Lightning March that I found, is if I could kill a level 5 gnome, I could kill a level 1 boss with 1 attack. If I killed a level 10 gnome, I was killing a level 2 boss, and so on and so forth as I climbed up. And while it's not a perfect math, it did balance out pretty well and work for me. So that one there, you can see that I was able to kill with 1 attack with the Lord Talent in play, 260 death. When we go back to my level 15 Lightning Giant Breaker, I didn't even get to kill it, and I had to use the improved skill twice. So my deaths are almost half with the earth bosses, and I can kill it with 1 attack versus the 2. So that was a huge difference. And I noticed that as I was starting to play, that a lot of these earth marches had dragons a lot more developed than my lightning dragon. And one of the reasons for that really was because they were just so much easier to kill. It really makes a big impact. You're also using a lot less AP because of it as well. A little bit more for myself. There we go. So the next thing I want to show you is just the march I was using prior to this. And if I go to my troops, that was actually my full on lightning march. Before I was using this march, I was actually using Hippolyta in place of Richard. So it was Hippolyta, Peter, YSG, and Genghis Khan. I did try using Himiko. Himiko doesn't work really well with bosses because there's only 1 boss, and she takes the back row immortal, one of the 2, and puts them into a void with her ultimate skill. So because that void is not doable because there's no back row immortal, we were wasting her ultimate skill, and I found more advantageous to keep YSG in. So I had YSG with Genghis Khan, Peter, and Hippolyta. I did try Hippolyta with Richard as well, and that also had mixed results. Sometimes I found it advantageous, other times I didn't. It really depended on if I had enough shieldmen or spearmen trained up, and I would take and place it in based off of that. There was both benefits to using both Richard being defensive, where I placed more attactive skills on Hippolyta and Genghis Khan, where if I had Hippolyta and Peter in, I was splitting my offensive skills in because I was low on skills at that time. I really only had the 12, I think maybe had 13 skills actually at that point in time. So I really didn't have a lot of options. So I was kind of balancing my attack and defensive skills, and I wound up putting more defensive skills on Hippolyta. And that didn't work as well. So I put more defensive skills on Peter, and he wound up dying too. So I really actually had mixed results by putting 2 attack like immortals in the front row, 1 being spearmen and 1 being a cavalry. And I needed to therefore utilize Richard with Hippolyta because it was more synergy between them. When we look at this, I did have artifacts set for defense, physical attack for YSG. Genghis Khan had his artifact completed, and he was also a physical attack bonus. And then the Goddess Waste Belt I also have applied to Peter the Great, and he's also a physical attack percent with an increased accuracy. So this was the march I was using to attack originally. My Giant Breakers again will take and use this boost skill because it was needed. And at that point, I was almost killing it at the halfway mark. So it really required either 2 free skills with regards to this effortless skill plus this boost here, or 2 of those boosts. So I'm really using 3 attacks. So I was using 3 times the AP, but my deaths were less when I was using this boost. So I found that advantageous. And you'll see here, I'm killing about 66%. So my ability to take out the bosses with my full lightning march, even with the 5 elemental boost, is a lot less than if I take and don't even have a single elemental boost for 3 marches in one. Take and kill this here. So I'm still losing about 500 to about 900. So it really is still almost half the losses here between the 2 different bosses. And even with the victories, I am still losing a significant amount of immortals to these bosses in comparison to the Earth bosses. So I really wanted to show just the challenge that you face when building these lightning marches in the bosses, and really thinking outside the box when you're looking at the troops you're going to be using to attack these bosses, and really how I found this march here, especially for early game. Now, there are a lot better marches as you reach to conquest or as you develop. So if you have some of the holy immortals, which like Khanabal Khan, Matilda, those ones are a lot more advantageous than even this march here. But if you're really starting out very early in the game, you don't have access to some of those high spending immortals or those really advanced immortals to develop, these are the ones that I found advantageous. If you're working with like a mixed march, this also would work very well. If you have a fire march, it might not be as advantageous because you're building 3 mortals outside of your original march, where the fire march does fairly well on its own. But if you're working with lightning, as you can see, I don't have even these immortals all the way developed up, and they're still working fairly well and better than my main march as a whole. Now, I did try Yoshi, who is a water immortal in this march, instead of Quinn. For some reason, I actually got better results with Quinn using the Lightning Dragon than Yoshi using the Lightning Dragon paired with Khan. I'm curious to know if others found using the Lightning March Yoshi with Khan and the Lightning Dragon more advantageous when you add in Hippolyta, and who else you use to pair in that front row. But for me, I tried at one point, it was Khan, Yoshi, Hippolyta, and I believe I tried both Peter and Richard, and the results still were a significant amount of deaths, where my death rate decreased drastically when I was using Quinn. I'm not sure if that's because of the increased attack speed and his ultimate skill allowing for that defensive aspect here. So I'm going to just pull up Quinn in relation to Yoshi. So I was increasing my attack speed and then creating wounds that couldn't be healed. And I'm not sure if that was more advantageous or not over Yoshi, which I actually recycled not too long ago. And his shoots 3 arrows, inflicting that physical damage to random enemy units. Where it's the boss, it would be that one enemy unit, so it's going to be always sending 3 arrow units to that enemy. And then if the damage is less than 50% troops, he increases his damage dealt by 50%. So I had to kind of wait until he was almost at half capacity of life to increase his damage, where Quinn doesn't have that limit. He's always going to be providing that damage where they can't heal at that 25% rate. And with the attacks, with the increased attack speed rate at 25%. So they're always not going to be able to heal, and that's 100% of the time, regardless of if we're below 50% or not. And then he always has that 25% increase to the attack speed for all the units within my march. And as I have a heavy march for damage, that allows for us to increase those attacks for ourselves. And then because I don't have any wind immortals, the second half of his ultimate skill is not being utilized in this march here. So what we're going to do is take a look at one of the battles where Quinn is on and how his ultimate skill is increasing that attack speed for all the units, and how he is inflicting wound on the enemy units and why that's advantageous. In addition, you'll want to pay attention that we do have Fighting Master on that gives us some immunity to control and reduces the damage that Khan is receiving. And really, I'm holding on to that reduced damage when I'm fighting these bosses. And then with regards to Alexander, we do have the increased attack speed with Berserk. And then with each successful normal attack, he is able to recover a small amount of HP. So that helps me a little bit there. Chaotic Blade is also going to inflict bleed when attacking a random enemy unit, which is always going to be the boss because there is no additional one available. It's going to also have a chance of increasing that damage as well. And so I find that also helpful. I find that Chaotic Blade is a little bit more advantageous than combo on Alexander for how I'm using the marches at this point in time. And I find combo a little bit better on Hippolyta. So I keep combo on Hippolyta and Chaotic Blade on Alexander. I do include Death Breath to increase Hippolyta's damage, as well as Adrenaline Rush, again, to get those attacks up. And if we look at our stats, you'll notice that she and Alex are almost neck and neck for how much damage they're providing. And then Genghis Khan is still putting out a significant amount of damage. I probably can look at the skills a little bit more and enhance his damage just enough. And then we do have some damage by Quinn, but really what I'm using Quinn for is not to provide damage, but to really be that support immortal to enhance all the damage on my other immortals that are on the playing field. So when we rewatch this report here, you're really going to be able to see when Quinn's when his ultimate skill is proctored, and it's because he will have a symbol. It will be a blue symbol, and we're going to see it really soon. So it's proctored here, and you'll see his cleave attack symbol. That's when we're really seeing his symbol proctored. That also is increasing the attack speed, but you'll notice that we're increasing that damage that our enemy is receiving. We have the seriously wounded, which is preventing all wounds from being healed right from the start. That's also coming from Genghis Khan's ultimate skill as well. And then we also have the reduced attack speed, some of the bleed from Alexander, and then you'll notice that the immortal boss was stunned as well, and that stunning was coming from the dragon skill. So we have the stunning from the dragon, and then a couple of the other side effects coming on here. So you can really see constantly that increased attack speed is always in play, which is extremely beneficial for all of these immortals. They're always going to be able to have that increased attack speed, and that's really advantageous for us. And because of that increased attack speed in they're able to put those bleeds, those serious wounds, onto these immortals. And you can see here right now that we were just sharing damage dealt between Quinn and Genghis Khan as well with that yellow line. So we're really trying to maximize that damage as much as we can with as little damage taken. So against the spider and against the bosses, I'm finding this march to be most advantageous. When I am running PvP events or arena events, this boss march lineup here is really working well. My second march, I'm still working on developing skills. You'll notice that I have a couple that aren't just quite right, and it's because I've used some skills. Now, weakness is one of the ones that I had on my main march, and then I switched it in for misleading because I found it more advantageous. But weakness was actually on Peter with misleading earlier in the game, and I had, I think, replaced malice with that when I was originally building, unless I was facing a fire march and then I replaced cleave. But for the most part, these skills are what I've been doing and working on building. Now, I still don't have any Triss skills, and I'm still a level 6, so you'll notice I don't have Castle 50. I actually don't even have my barracks all the way up to level 47 yet. I'm working on it. I have 2 more to go. And my immortal skills, when I go into my training yard, I'm still working on developing my research as well on my immortals. So when I move towards the skills after, just before energy surge and after outstanding talent, I'm working on getting these all up to level 10. I've almost gotten there. I'm still working on line of shields right now too. So I actually was shy on resources, so I backed back into this one here to get some of these up for myself as well. So I'm still working on a lot of my research within my academy to help. One of the things I found very advantageous in that research for Peter, and if you're doing any form of march with Peter, make sure you really are focusing on the spearman research as heavily as you can. And the spear sweep really helped with increasing Peter's ability to attack and perform damage. Now, with regarding PvP and that march I use originally for my bosses with all 5 of my lightning immortals, I will show you a couple of battles that I had in regards to my lightning versus other lightning marches. So, as I've explained, Peter does die, but he does stay on for a fairly long time. And I do find him more advantageous than El Cid. And as I've explained, El Cid is great for certain parts in the game, but when you're facing other lightning marches, I can almost always win a battle against El Cid. And while I'm not exactly evenly matched for my dragon skills, with regards to being T6 and Zizo being T7, and we both have our marches pretty much up there with skills as well. So he's using a lot of different skills than I am, but we are also using some very similar skills. And I'm able to normally perform fairly well. And Zizo and I started playing right around the same time. So you'll see that my lightning march does start to struggle and break down when I go against the mixed earth wind. But I can also show you, I believe Wrestler also uses a march with lightning. She doesn't use lightning with El Cid, but she does have Elizabeth in her march. And that march I actually do a little bit better against. Again, this is her second march. Her primary march is also a earth wind march, and I just am not able to perform super well against that. So I'm able to normally manage to go against her second march. When I get to her first march, I start to struggle and break down again. And then let's see if I have another one in here. Wiper, I think, also uses a lightning march, or he did. Yes. So Wiper also loses a lightning march. His lightning march is not his second or his first march. His first march, I believe, is his water, followed by earth. So I am able to perform fairly well if there isn't any Triss skills in play, and I am about equal in power. Now, I do have a couple, I'm trying to figure out dominatrix. I think occasionally we're about 50-50 between the two. Same thing with regards to El Maki. I sometimes can win against El Maki, and other times I can. It's really a 50-50, and it comes down to his Earth March here. If I can take out Zenobia, I can normally win. If I can't take out Zenobia, I start to fall apart. And he just added Vitality Touch, which is where I am starting to decrease my ability to actually tackle his Earth Wind March here. So I'm assuming pretty soon I'll start really constantly being able to lose against him. Bigger Bossman, I also believe, has T6 troops with, I believe he has also a lightning march, but it's not developed. Nope. Who else has? Jaffel's normally pretty good too. Yeah, so you'll start to see that it just falls apart when I'm getting to these earth marches with wind blends that are well developed with good skills in place. I just am not able to compete with my lightning march the way it needs to compete. So I hope this helps kind of show a little bit about where things are. I can even show you in Throne of Supreme kind of where I fell. So I was able to win this match here. Now, this was not a completely equal match here because they weren't as developed. They're really just focused on their fire wind march, which is a really interesting combination. And then the prior matches I had, the only one I was able to really not win against is Castler's. If we look at one of his marches, I was able to take out his mixed march with, it looks like just ultimate characters that he's thrown in together. I was not able to defeat his fire with my secondary march, but I was able to take out a majority of his fire with my main march here. And that's going against his dragon skills at level 5 and fully maxed out. So I am able to make some significant damage here. The hard thing is when you get to his main march, which also is a earth wind blend, I was not able to compete against that. So really, I'm not thinking that lightning is a bad march, but no matter what I do, I'm always looking at, I need one more thing. Triss skills is really hard because to compete against some of those earth Triss skills, you need to be in conquest to get those skills because they're not available before conquest. With regards to immortals and the ones that may help, at least using the magic immortal hymnary, I need to have Toke, and Toke is a conquest immortal. When you're looking at developing the dragon, as you could see, I really needed to build a whole new march just to take down my bosses so I could have a developed dragon. And I'm using Khan and my dragon is the only elements of my or my lightning march in there. And to get to that point, I was taking a lot of losses. So I'm constantly healing troops versus using those troops, those resources to build and develop research. I'm not able to use as little AP to kill the Earth Marches because they are so powerful. I'm having to send my troops 2, sometimes 3 times out. and I'm using the increased AP boost to decrease my deaths and decrease the number of times I need to send marches out. And that also is it playing a huge role on resources and aspects of growth. So really think hard if you want to pursue this path. It is not one I would recommend for free to play because, as you can see, you need so many different immortals, and to balance them out, it's I'm not even sure going to be a good primary march moving into Conquest. I might wind up moving into that Earth Himiko meta and then trying some of those immortals that are available in Conquest to see if I can develop a different type of march that is unique and still strong. But the one thing I would say about the Lightning March, and I found extremely advantageous, and one of the reasons why I would encourage you to play the Lightning March, is it really requires you to look at those skills, look at those boost reports, read and understand what you're looking at, being able to adjust and flex and move your immortals around for each different type of battle you're playing. And because of that, you're going to really understand your immortals, your skills, the boost, the opponents, what's happening on those battlefields, and you'll be able to understand that more than maybe someone who's going through an Earth Wind or an Earth March or a Fire March and are able to set their marches and forget them and use them primarily for no matter what activity they're doing. So because you're constantly moving and changing and adjusting and trying different aspects for different elements in the game, your skill sets and understanding how the different skills and synergies of your marches work, I can guarantee will be a lot stronger if you play the Lightning the way Lightning needs to be played. So it's a great element to learn the game with. Not a great element if you want to win and come out first all the time. I hope this video helped you understand a little bit about how I used my Lightning March, especially in the early game before you reached Conquest, and it helps you grow and develop as well. If you have any questions, please reach out and we can always look things over together, or I can go into more detail about different questions or avenues or aspects of the game, particularly with that Lightning March early in season 1, 2, 3 in preparation. So we can make sure if you are proceeding down that path and that's one you really want to commit to, we're really helping you use your resources as advantageously as we can and not waste them, because you really need to make sure you're spending those extremely wisely because of how much it's going to cost. Even getting those skills up, your deaths for your bosses are a lot greater, and that means your soul crystals are going to be a lot less because you're taking a lot more damage, and that means you're going to have a lot less troops in your training yard, and when your troops drop below a certain percentage in that training yard, you're no longer able to send out troops for raids. So then you're manually sending your troops out with different lord talents, particularly the safe and sound talent, to really help with your their safe and sound, to really help with decreasing those deaths. There's different Now, should you choose to pursue the Lightning March, there are different tips and tricks that you can utilize to allow yourself to advance and to minimize some of those losses and damages, or to take advantage of different games so you are receiving multiple rewards for less use of troops, such as the double gnomes troop rewards, troop experience, or using your marches to go along in other caravans to help with receiving some of those exclusive artifacts, and then also working with your team to join in on specific events that allow for you to play the Infernal event, where your losses might be more than someone who has maybe an Earth March. So make sure if you are playing the Lightning March as your main march and you're early in the game and that really is the only march you have developed, you're really taking advantage of your alliance events and joining as many things as you can, and working with maybe some of your stronger players to see if they will even help you with some of those bosses and bringing them down for you, and maybe exchange for other avenues such as like honor points to help each of your members grow and develop. So there are ways you can develop your march and work with your teammates so you're not taking on as many losses. And I would highly encourage you to find each and every single avenue if you are pursuing that lightning march. If you enjoyed this video, please remember to like and subscribe. I do hope it answers any of those questions you might have early on in the game when you're starting to build this lightning march, and how you can really evolve the march, what things you might need to consider, and how you can even utilize different resources to enhance your lightning march. But remember, it is going to require a little bit more time. Be patient with yourself. You will see results, but the results may not be as great at the end of the game as if you were building maybe a strong meta march. Have a wonderful weekend, and please remember to like and subscribe if you enjoyed this content.